Retro now.
Hello there. This is James Arnold Taylor, the voice of Obi-Wan Kenobi, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continuously unexpected. So uncivilized.
Hello, and welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are closing out another week with a look at some recent Star Wars news and some news that's adjacent to Star Wars. Before we get into that, Jay, I want to remind everybody where we can be found on social media.
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the aligned, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down, we are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So this is a relatively quiet week for Star Wars news, but we got some things that are adjacent and aligned, and I think that'll give us an opportunity to have some interesting discussion here. But up first, we were just talking about the new Marvel Star Wars crossover. It's being written by Kevin Smith, which is called Hope Assembles. And we know that's coming in January, and it's going to feature the Star Wars characters coming over into the Earth of the 616 universe and interacting with many of our Marvel heroes. And Kevin Smith has been on a couple of podcasts lately, the Fat Man and Beyond and Jay and Silent Bob podcast, to be more specific, where he's had an opportunity to talk about this a little bit. Of course, he's under non-disclosure agreement, so there's only so much he can say. But what he did say was kind of interesting. He mentioned that he decided to limit the cast of characters he was going to use from Star Wars to those that appeared in A New Hope, basically to try and just kind of keep it from getting out of hand. I think that's probably a good idea, and I think that makes all the sample covers that we were given online with these news make much more sense, because it really was Luke, Leia, Han, and others in their A New Hope year and appearances.
Yeah, and I have to say that this makes me want to buy into the idea a little bit more, because I know last week I was kind of ho-hum and boo-hoo on the whole idea, and I didn't know if it would work and all the things. But I like the fact that he's putting kind of a box around A New Hope, establishing that as a baseline, specifically fitting that into the 50th anniversary angle. I just think that makes so much more sense. And you don't have all these weird spin-off, what about this and what about that? There are some definite what ifs, but at least this is a little bit of an easier capsule to swallow, so to speak. But how do you feel about it?
Oh, I think it's interesting, and it kind of helps think about what this might be. Luke Skywalker is in no way a Jedi at this point. He has a lightsaber, but Obi-Wan Kenobi, we know which Obi-Wan we're going to get in this situation. Leia is the Leia that was standing up to Darth Vader from A New Hope, and Han is the guy who's trying to tell the galaxy that he doesn't care about anything but himself. He's in it for the reward, type of a character. And that, I think, could be really interesting, dealing with a number of Marvel heroes out there. So, but that's not all he had to say about this. He said that there was a number of limitations that were put in place and a lot of interesting conversations that have come up, such as, what can a lightsaber cut through? Does it cut through adamantium? Does it cut through Captain America's shield? How about Wolverine's claws? The Hulk's arm were a few of the things that he threw out there. This brought to mind, I think, I can't remember if it was Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or whatever it was, where someone had mentioned, whether a lightsaber could cut through vibranium, which is what Captain America's shield is made out of. And Mark Hamill and Chris Evans kind of got into back and forth about this, that, Mark Hamill's saying, yeah, a lightsaber could totally carve up Captain America's shield. And then Chris Evans says, well, now that's just crazy, because now I have vibranium throwing stars. So it's, I don't know if anyone else made that connection, but I just thought that was a little funny that came out of that. And so beyond that, Kevin Smith teased that Greedo's going to have a larger role in all of this, which is an interesting choice. And there will be some sort of a confrontation between Princess Leia and Iron Man.
I am so here for that one. Let me just tell you that, I mean, can you just see that Tony Stark and Leia? She's just got another scruffy nerf herder to deal with.
Exactly. Yeah, that was my thought too, is that where Iron Man is a bit more about being a hero and the public good overall from most iterations that we know him, I could still see his snarkiness and his ability to throw around his billions rubbing her the wrong way. So
for sure.
Just a fun idea.
Yeah, and Leia can take it. Definitely. Yeah. She'll give it right back to him.
So yeah, I know it's something that we talked about it, and and I still don't expect this to count by any stretch of the imagination for continuity's sake for either one of these franchises.
Sure.
It has made me slightly more intrigued for this series when it comes out next year.
Next year, yeah. Yep.
All right. So we don't normally cover a lot of product release in our regular news episodes, but this just came out and was announced, and it doesn't necessarily fit in the World Between Worlds either. So I wanted to talk about it because everyone knows about my interest with Star Wars Lego. But they are going to release their longest set ever, what just happens to be the Super Star Destroyer, or more specifically, Darth Vader's Executor. And this set will be arriving in October. It's going to cost $800. The assembled model will be over 4 feet long. It'll contain over 6,000 pieces. It'll feature a minifigure collection of Darth Vader and the bounty hunters, plus a little backdrop that you can build that has a replica of that bridge scene where he hires them and tells them to retrieve the Han Solo and the Millennium Falcon. And for those of you that are Lego insiders, if you buy it from October 1st to the 7th, you get a free set, which is Darth Vader's lightsaber. This is kind of a new thing that they've been doing lately, where certain promotional periods, you buy a certain amount of Lego, you get this free lightsaber set. And I have the Darksaber that my wife got for me when that came from, I believe, May the 4th. Haven't put it together yet, but it's there. So anyway, what'd you make of this, Jay?
Wow, this isn't just a Lego set. This is a piece of furniture.
Yeah.
I mean, especially with them talking about it's 4 feet long. Wow, that is incredible. I did see recently there was a collector that had the Millennium Falcon put together, and we often talk about, like, where would you put this thing? How would you display this? What would you do with it? So I thought to myself, wow, you really could treat this as a piece of furniture. What he did was he had a specially made, I don't know if it was like a clear acrylic type thing or if it was made out of glass, but it was essentially a round table with metal skeleton to it, so you could see, obviously from all sides, and then the top was removable. So he took the top off to show how he cleans his Falcon, and he was, feather dusting it and doing all of these different types of things. So I could see this as a coffee table. That would be fantastic, right? I mean, because what else would you do with it? Other than that, unless you had like a huge fan cave kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't have a place for this in my house. I don't have a place for all the Lego sets that I have now, but that doesn't stop me from getting them and enjoying them and putting them together. But this is just enormous. And if you're going to do it, you want some place that you can store it and display it safely. I know I've talked about that in the past, especially on some World Between World episodes where you don't want to go through all the trouble of assembling these things. With 6,000 pieces, that for me is going to be most of a 3-day project. At least if I were to do that, only to have it someplace where pieces are going to fall off or you're going to get like knocked off from just all kinds of casual things that you don't even think of. You back into a shelf where you got a model stored and all of a sudden it falls over and parts come off, it breaks down, whatever the case is. And with that amount of financial and time investment, you'd really want to be able to take care of this thing. So yeah. It looked great.
$800 is huge.
Yeah, it looks amazing.
It does look great.
But that's just not in my future. So
Right, right. What I think is also really cool about it is that you do get all 6 of the bounty hunters that you see,
mhm.
in that scene that you just mentioned, the briefing scene, but there's no Admiral Piet. We need an Admiral Piet. I mean, come on, he should be on board, right?
Oh, sure. A lot of these times, I don't like. Okay, so I have enough. I have several of the UCF collector sets, and typically what happens is that you build the set and then a couple of minifigures that are relevant to that set. For instance, the Y-wing comes with a Rebel pilot and an astromech, and there's a little display stand that you have for the set, and then you fit the model on top of the stand, and the characters are on both sides, kind of like an informational plaque. And similarly, I've got BB-8, and so you assemble BB-8, it's got the same type of a stand, and then there's a little tiny BB-8 minifig that goes right in front of the whole thing. R2-D2 is the same way. The X-wing, all these sets have this type of stuff. So I think probably what came down to this description to make these particular characters is that they could put a little scene on there as opposed to try and make some gigantic long base underneath the model that has like all the relevant figures to the set. This is a different way of going about it by actually giving them a scene as opposed to just standing them up next to the
Mhm.
display image. But yeah, you would think Piet would have been natural for that. Certainly.
Is there actually a Piet minifig? I don't know this. Do you know this?
I gotta believe there is somewhere at somewhere. This is not the
Right?
first version of this model of the Super Star Destroyer. There's been others out there, but this is just a bigger version of it. They reissue these models all the time. There's been multiple versions of the X-Wing, multiple versions of R2-D2, you name it. A lot of them have come out over and over. Someone else like refines the model. And so who knows? Whenever, 10 years from now, when they make another version of the Superstar Destroyer, maybe that one will have Piet on it. And that would make sense.
Sure.
Yeah,
Very cool though. So if anybody out there decides to get this, you need to take some pictures and let us know and give us some updates.
indeed. Okay, so the last story that we have is that this past week has been a heck of a week. It's seen the passing of a number of celebrities, but the most relevant to Star Wars was Tim Curry. He passed away. We're recording on Thursday, the 27th, for release on the 28th. But he passed away yesterday, the 26th, at the age of 80. And of course, he's famous for such roles as Frankenfurter from the Rocky Horror Picture Show, Long John Silver in The Muppets Treasure Island, Wadsworth and Clue. He was King Arthur in Spamalot. He was in Home Alone 2. He played Darkness in the Legend movie, and of course, he was in The Hunt for Red October, amongst dozens and dozens, if not hundreds, of voice roles and
Mhm.
other acting roles that he had over time. But for Star Wars' sake, he was the voice of Chancellor Palpatine in 10 episodes of the Clone Wars. And I remember when I first learned that fact years ago, I never would have guessed that Tim Curry was doing that voice, but he did. And you, you know, Chancellor Palpatine's not in every episode of the Clone Wars, so that's a significant contribution to that role. I mean, Sam Witwer's done it, and other people have done it since then as well. There's been a number of people that have played Chancellor Palpatine, but yeah, I've always liked Tim Curry, and we've always said it that when you have these Star Wars luminaries and you get a chance to meet them, you should always take advantage of that. Well, he was originally
Right.
scheduled to be at some of the Dallas fan expos in recent years, but he hasn't been able to make it because he was still suffering from complications from a stroke. I want to say he had back in 2012 or sometime around 1 year around there. And so he hasn't been able to make it. And I would love to find an opportunity to meet him for that. But
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
I've lived on about long enough. What are your thoughts on his passing?
Well, I actually when I saw this and we had planned to talk about this on the news, I'm with you. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I forgot that he had stepped into the role after Ian Abercrombie died."
Yeah.
And that's who was doing the voice of Palpatine. So it wasn't until season 5 that Tim Curry had stepped in. And so I kind of went down a rabbit hole and I was looking up some things about this. And I found someone had posted, and I'll have to try to remember to send you the link, but someone had posted almost a side by side comparison of Ian versus Tim's voice when it came to Palpatine. And you're right. I mean, there's a very subtle difference to that, but most notably in the episode of The Lawless, where Curry really delivered what Palpatine would have sounded like being that sinister. You know what I mean? Because up to that point in the Clone Wars, if you think about it, Palpatine was always portrayed as kind of grandfatherly, and benign and that type of thing. And that's what Ian Abercrombie brought to the voice. And so, Tim Curry's was a very different type of Palpatine, but yet if you're listening for Tim Curry, then you'll hear him. So, now that now that I'm kind of training myself to do that, and it was just really interesting to see how that comparison had taken place. So we were very gifted to have Tim Curry as Palpatine for sure.
Yeah, and of course by season 5, that's when we were like well beyond the grandfatherly Chancellor Palpatine in most episodes, and someone who was far more sinister on an episode by episode basis. So that makes a ton of sense. Do you have a favorite non-Star Wars role of Tim Curry's?
Well, of course, the Rocky Horror Picture Show has a very near and dear place in my heart because I went to Kent State University for college, and they used to have these at the local movie theater where you would get in for just dirt cheap because college students were poor. And they used to show the Rocky Horror Picture Show, and people would bring all the props. So have you ever been to a showing where, you throw the bread and like you do all the things? So
I
that
have
was
not. No.
yeah. Oh my gosh, it was so much fun. But so that was one of my favorite memories, I think, from that era. But I also loved him in Clue.
Yes.
And I didn't realize that it was the same guy when I was growing up watching Clue as Frankenfurter. And it wasn't until I think years later that I realized, oh my gosh, that was the same guy. So you said you liked him in Clue as well?
Well, yes. I have to make a confession. I've never sat down and watched the entire Rocky Horror Picture Show. I've seen clips of almost the entire movie, and I'm aware of his role in that movie. But Clue is one of my top 10 favorite movies of all time. And
oh, wow. I did not know that about you.
Yes. It's one of my favorite. I kind of lump it into the comedy category, but it is also just a brilliant mystery, especially since they set it up so well to have the 3 alternate endings that they have. And I remember as a kid, when it first came out into theaters, you didn't know which ending you were going to get when you went and saw it. And then there had different theaters that would start advertising that they had ending A, B, or C. And after like a couple weeks, and I remember going to see it in different theaters to see the alternate endings for the movie. And I'm not going to spoil who did it or anything like that, but he's Wadsworth, who was the butler and is kind of the de facto leader of everyone trying to figure out who killed who in what room with what weapon, that type of thing. It's based off the board game. And I remember as a kid also this was like the first time I had a thought of like, wow, they're really taking some IP and really trying to make something of it, because I played the Clue board game in school all the time. Like if you had a rainy day where you couldn't go outside for recess, that'd be like one of the board games that was made available for everyone to play during recess or whatever, or lunches and things like that. But going to see it, I loved it. And then as I've gotten older, I've only appreciated it more and more for different reasons over the years. And I thought his role was just, he was so fantastic as Wadsworth.
Oh yeah.
And
absolutely.
And yeah, I also am huge on his performance as King Arthur in Spamalot. Of course, that was on Broadway. I never went to Broadway and saw him do it. But when I heard about it, I went and I bought the cast recording that they did with, and they released on CD. And I listened to that over and over and over in my car for weeks at a time. And when then eventually the show went on the road and he wasn't in it, but I got to see that when it was here in Dallas at the Dallas summer musicals. But he's highly underrated, I think, in many regards. And that when I was prowling around on his IMDb page and I just saw like all these voice roles and things that I had no idea he had ever appeared in, I was just like, wow. I mean, this guy he was prolific. In some ways, it's like Alan Tudyk or some of these other people who just do like these countless numbers of voice roles. And a lot of times it's like, wow, I just, a lot of things I had never seen, but there's a number of things I was seeing. Like, I don't remember him doing that voice. My boys had watched a ton of Phineas and Ferb growing up, and he did the voice on that. I was like, really? I have to go back and check that one out. I don't remember that being him.
Wow, I didn't know that either.
Yeah. So he really, really got out there.
Yeah, he truly did. And I'll tell you, with Home Alone 2, I've never seen Spamalot, so we're even there, I guess. But with Home Alone 2, I mean, you think about it, we've lost 3 actors from that movie this year. I mean, Catherine O'Hara, which was just devastating. I mean, every loss is devastating. And then Tim, and then I can't think of her name, but she was the pigeon lady that was in Home Alone 2 or Home Alone. And yeah, so it's just, gosh, we're just losing legend after legend. And so those rewatches of those movies, especially around the holidays, are really going to hit differently this year. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, 3 days in a row, we got Dolly Parton, Tim Curry, and Peter Cullen, of course, the voice of Charles. And I was like, man, this is really killing us Gen Xers right here.
Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, Dolly is a voice for the generation. She doesn't belong to just Gen Xers, but Tim Curry and Peter Cullen really are. They're not from Gen X, but they are personalities that we as Gen Xers just grew up with that played such important roles. I mean, you can't look at an image of Optimus Prime and not hear Peter Cullen's voice.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, they say you can't hear an image. Oh, challenge right there, accepted. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, there was no sweeter person in the world than Dolly Parton. Everything that she's done for everybody. And so it's been a rough week on that front.
Indeed. Have you ever been to Dollywood? I have not.
No, I've been to Silver Dollar City, which is Dollywood was a Silver Dollar City before it became Dollywood. So I'm somewhat familiar with what the experience is, but that was the Tennessee location that became Dollywood. And so, excuse me, no, I have not been there.
That's one place I've always loved to go. I've had on my bucket list, but we'll see. Maybe I'll get there someday.
Yeah. I remember my parents would play quite a bit of her music when I was growing up. And I'm much more of a rock fan. So it wasn't something that I did, continued with as I started establishing my own taste. But, I'm familiar with the duet she did with Kenny Rogers, Island in the Stream, and Working 9 to 5 and those type of things. And she was always a fun interview when you saw her on television.
Oh, yeah. And ever just so eloquent, and the interviewers would sometimes try to bait her to say certain things, and she just put them right in their place. I'm not going to talk about that, sweetheart, kind of thing. And if you brought me here to talk about this, that's what we're going to talk about. We're not going to talk about that. And oh my gosh, I just love that about her.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew. So what a week. All right. Well, we could reminisce about the three of them for quite a bit longer, but we're just going to say goodbye and thank you to all of them and their contributions to everything that we experienced over the last 40, 50 years. Wow, it's been that long. So anyway, but we'll go ahead and wrap up the news with that. This is a shorter episode, but we hope everyone understands there just wasn't a whole lot of Star Wars news out there to begin with. But I am glad that we got to say goodbye to Tim Curry, Dolly Parton, and Peter Cullen. So okay. Well, thank you for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and this discussion of recent Star Wars and Star Wars adjacent news. We hope you've enjoyed it, and make sure you come back next week for our news discussion. And you can do that by subscribing to the podcast, and that'll get downloaded for you automatically. We're pretty much available on all the podcatchers that are out there. We appreciate your ratings, reviews, likes, comments, and such, wherever you can leave those, especially on Apple Podcasts. And then if you want to catch an even larger chunk of our back catalog, head over to retrozap.com, where all previous 1,076 episodes of the show can be found, as well as all the other shows that are on the RetroZap Podcast Network. Some current shows and some past shows. Our old show, Starship Shapers and Scoundrels, has got an archive over there. And Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody of those social media contacts and where else we can find on the internet one more time?
Absolutely, Dennis. So we are most conveniently found on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. And you can always hit us up on our Pinterest boards where we have tons of ideas for everything Star Wars. And don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube outlets as well. So we have the traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music, where you can like, subscribe, share that out to your friends. Leave us some reviews and some comments as well. And if you'd like to email us, you can drop us a line at podcaststardust@gmail.com. And we're still looking for listener questions. So please send those our way. And if you need a closet refresh or you just want some new Podcast Artist merch, we do have a TeePublic store. The link for that is in our show notes. And you can pick from one of 7 different show logo designs with all kinds of fun things, from apparel to some coffee mugs and lots of other fun stuff as well.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Monday, we're getting back into The Ninth Jedi with a discussion of episode 4. And then on Wednesday, it is the next installment in our Darth Bane book club. We're going to be looking at chapters 20 and 21 from Path of Destruction. So until we are back, thanks for listening to episode 1077 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great weekend. And until next time, may the Force be with you.